You ready?
That's what I'm going to be doing.
I just want to thank everybody so much for being here. This is my thesis presentation for my project titled Disrupting Privilege Through Augmented Reality. I'm just going to start with a very brief video that shows an overview of my project. Don't look at that. Sorry.
University of Denver, home to a vibrant community of students and educators, but each of us embodies the intersection of privilege and oppression. What if there was a way to visualize the privilege that exists all around us? Using the augmented reality app layer, I have created an interactive map of privilege on campus. With your mobile device, you can experience points of privilege at DU. For example, did you know that all of the chancellors in our school's history have been white males? With my layer, you can see this information visually represented at the chancellor's office. Points are represented by icons that float in their geographic location. Each entry has additional information such as resources, checklists of privilege, and videos. In this way, you can see events in the exact location where they occurred. By creating visual representations of privilege on campus and grounding them in a physical location, the concept of privilege becomes tangible, taking the invisible power of privilege and making it visible so we can begin to disrupt it. By disrupting privilege, we can begin to create a more inclusive community. Download the Layer app on your Android or iOS device, go to GeoLayers, and search for Privilege at DU to experience it for yourself.
So that's just a brief overview of my project in a nutshell, and now I'll get into more of the details. I began thinking about privilege in my graduate research methods class here at the university. To be fair, I had learned about the concept by attending the final presentation for the Disrupting Privilege Caucus at the Graduate School of Social Work before I was even a student here. That was in 2009, and I remember thinking at the time that it was interesting and then not thinking about it again until the fall of 2012 in my graduate research methods class. I'm not sure why, but that morning it really struck me. There were 10 people in the room, including the professor. And of those 10 people, 8 were male, 9 were white, and all 10 of us were heterosexual and cisgender. And cisgender means that the sex that you're assigned at birth is congruent with your gender identity. So if you add to this the fact that our university costs on average 4 times more than UCD just down the street, I felt like the privilege in the room was palpable. So I began to think about why being a student at DU made me think about privilege more. So this chart shows the city of Denver ethnic demographics compared to our university. And as you can see, there's quite a disparity. So our campus is about 70% white compared to 50% in Denver. There's a large gap in the Hispanic population, only 7% here at DU versus 32% in Denver as a whole, and as well as with the black population. So this could be one of the reasons why I started as a student on campus to really think about privilege more and to think about how it was affecting me. So what do I mean by privilege? Privilege is afforded to us based on varying factors such as gender, religion, sexual orientation, and age. So whether or not we acknowledge it, it exists and it affects many aspects of our daily lives. In her 1988 seminal work, White Privilege Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, Peggy McIntosh defines privilege as an invisible package of unearned assets. She then goes on to list 50 privileges that she feels she receives for being a white individual in America. And there are 3 of these that I felt are really relevant still to this day. And they are, when I am told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. I am never asked to speak for all of the people of my racial group. And I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily physical protection. And you can see specific examples of that last one in the news all of the time. Trayvon Martin is a great indication of that, and also the recent attacks on Boston, when they released photos of the suspects, there was a 17-year-old kid who was a track star who was just there to run the marathon, and people had began identifying him, even though it wasn't him, and he's afraid for his life because he's a brown person. Another example of a different type of privilege is cisgender privilege. And these are experiences that I experience every single day as a cisgender person, the privileges that I have. I am not worried about losing a job due to how I express my gender identity. I feel certain that medical insurance will cover most of my medical needs. I do not live in fear of violence, humiliation, or exclusion based on my gender identity. And so these are really just bringing the points of privilege and specific examples into light. And I have these checklists on all of the points of privilege in my project. And I did this because I think that when you're talking about privilege, sometimes it can become really abstract and not relatable. So when you see these specific examples, you can then say, oh, I experienced that, or oh, I never thought about it that way, and make it more relatable and understandable for everyone. I've been using this chart from Bob Pease's book, Undoing Privilege, of what is valued and devalued in Western society to base my study of privileges and to come to a better understanding of it. My project focuses on male, white, heterosexual, able-bodied, and cisgender privileges. Now, before I get into the project breakdown, I'd like to share a personal story that helped shape this project into what it became. My original proposal was something a little bit different. I was going to focus on cisgender privilege, and I was going to use image recognition software in more of an installation type setting. So that's what I studied. I wanted to focus on cisgender privilege because I feel that oftentimes the transgender community becomes an invisible and unacknowledged aspect of our society. Then I received an email about a graduate student facilitated a workshop on discussing white privilege. I was excited that this was being thought of here on campus, that space was being created to have these discussions. And then I immediately thought, well, I guess I can't go since it's on white privilege. What would happen if I were to walk into the room? Would my being there cause people to censor themselves and perhaps miss out on an opportunity to grow? Or would I become the non-white spokesperson on all issues that they were talking about? So while the space was created, I'm sure, to be inclusive, it felt exclusionary to me because I didn't have white privilege. I realized then that my installation could unintentionally further marginalize the transgender community. So I began to think about ways that I could include more privileges so that everyone could find a voice in the conversation. And that really speaks to everybody's intersection with privilege and oppression. Most of us experience some privileges and some oppression. Using myself as an example, I'm an educated, heterosexual, cisgendered, able-bodied, Black female. So if I were to focus on the oppression that I face as a Black female, that would make it easy for me to ignore all of the other privileges that I gain. So that's really what my project is about, is trying to find those intersections and having people be able to see it and relate to it. So in the project breakdown, I'm going to be talking about the technical aspects of the project as well as my personal experiences in finding the points that I was going to include. As I began to think about ways that I could make privilege visible on campus, augmented reality became a clear choice as a tool to use. Augmented reality is when real-world input is augmented by virtual objects and information, often in real time and often using mobile technologies. My project uses the augmented reality platform layer, which is open source for Android and iOS devices, and that really uses the geolocation capabilities of your mobile technologies and creates an interactive map of points. So with that, I've created visual markers for privilege on campus, which turns your mobile technology, your mobile device, into a guided walking tour of privilege on campus. And I feel that this app has been really useful in that it's powerful to create this embodied experience. So getting to layer, I had some difficulties working with this program at first. It's pretty complicated to understand what's going on. It doesn't look scary at first, but then you delve into it and you're like, I don't understand what's happening. So basically you start by signing up as a developer on the layer website, and then from there you can create a layer. And then you need to assign an API endpoint. So that is a MySQL file that is hosted on your web hosting service, and that pulls in information that you've created in a database using PHP and MySQL, where you load in all of your information, and that pulls it from where you're storing that information, the visual markers or videos, whatever you're using, on your web hosting service, and then that all gets pulled in by layer to create the points on your project. So the first time I did this, I had no idea what's happening. I just followed Connor's directions step by step, and I was like, oh, I have a layer. I don't know why. The second time, I created a project for the National Conference Media Reform that happened here in Denver, just to try and understand the program more. And I could do it better and faster, but I still didn't understand it. But by the time I created this layer, I was like, oh, I need to have this file here so that they can get my password and my username and pull the information from the database, which I have stored here. So it's just a gradual process, and I thank Connor for showing me all of the steps over and over again. So this is just screenshots of the layer website, which doesn't look scary, like I said. So this is where you can create your layers, the general information, the API endpoint, and you can begin to customize what it's going to look like by adding screenshots and banners and just other icons. And then this is what the database looks like. These are all the tables that I created in my database using the MySQL commands that were copied and pasted from files in the layer developer section. And then these are the points where you add your specific information and the name of the point, the latitude and longitude, the pictures, the descriptions. I also utilize the icon table a lot to create custom icons for each entry, which is called in on the point of interest table by each icon having a specific number. And then the POI action table I used a lot as well to create all of the actions that are on each entry. This will let you go to websites, launch videos and audio, call things, email somebody. So that is building it. And then the biggest challenge after I had tackled and understood layer was really finding the points that I was going to highlight. I wanted to make sure that each point really captured the complexity of privilege and was more than just sitting on the surface. So I've got two different points of interest. I've got the privilege points and then the resource points, which are notated by the star icons. And I felt that it was important to include the resource points because it gives you action. The privilege points raise the awareness, and then the resource points lead you to places where you can continue to have these conversations. And some of the resource points include the University Disability Services, which provides services for students with disabilities, the Women's Coalition, which houses 4 main groups for women's groups for staff, faculty, and students. It's really about empowerment and leadership opportunities. As well as the Center for Multicultural Excellence, which houses a majority of the Students' Alliance groups. And there are Student Alliance groups for many different things. There's several LGBTQ and ally groups. There's Asian Student Alliance, Black Student Alliance. There's just a lot of alliances. I encourage you to look on there and get involved. So this is just a breakdown of what the entries kind of look like. In the top right corner, there's that's all the points on the map, and then it'll show you what you're looking at and if you're closer or farther away. The icon floats in space, and it gets larger as you get closer to it. And then there's a brief description that I've added for each point, and then the resources and further information. So talking about this point specifically and how it relates to the complexity of privilege, This is a gender-neutral facility in the Graduate School of Social Work. And it's really here to talk about bathroom politics that transgender and gender nonconforming individuals often face. It's interesting to note that this is the only multi-stall gender-neutral facility on campus. This is also the only one that has the terminology as all genders, as opposed to man-woman. So the resource points on this entry, I've included a link to the definition of cisgender, since I know that it is not a commonly used term and people might not be familiar with it, as well as an interactive Google map of all the gender-neutral restrooms on campus, which was created by an LGBT group here on campus, as well as the resources such as the ally groups and the checklist of cisgender privilege. Oh, sorry, as well as a call to action for everybody to just basically to end bathroom politics because you don't know what's happening with anybody else. And also a call, if you see something happening, to be an advocate, to stand up and say, hey, this isn't right. Another example of the complexities that I found is with male privilege in the faculty. In my research, I discovered that men made more on average in every single category: professor, associate professor, assistant professor, and lecturer. In addition to that, only 13.8% of the female faculty had reached the top position of professor versus 35.6% of their male colleagues. So reading this information was jarring for me, and then creating this visual of it really brought it to point, especially when you can see the giant gap in professorship. But then actually seeing it in the location where it is grounds it into a really tangible and visceral experience. This points at the Mary Reed building, which houses the Human Resources Department. And you can see the full chart there. And it just really creates this experience to know that this is happening where you're standing. But this point also raises more complex situations, because if you look into it further, you'll see that the female faculty dominate the arts and humanities, while the male faculty dominate science, mathematics, engineering, and the School of Business. So this really raises the question about our societal hierarchy on the STEM subjects over arts and humanities, but also female access to these areas of study. And so the resource points on this that I bring up, one is the Women's Staff Alliance Networking Development, which is for staff and faculty on campus. They have networking events and development events to try and promote leadership and to reach your highest potential here on campus. I've also included a link to volunteer opportunities to become mentors for young women around the community to really promote leadership and education. And then some of the points that I have really speak to raising awareness about issues. And the Chancellor's is a great example of this. I can't say I was too shocked. Well, I was kind of shocked as I was looking for everyone's picture, because they have a list of names on the Chancellor's website. I was going through and finding everybody, and I was like, So this really, seeing it at the Chancellor's office, raises the question, in 133 years, has there really never been a female or person of color that is appropriate for this office? And it's just really bringing up these questions and raising the awareness about it. This is something that is not hidden, it's not unknown, but you probably never just consciously thought about it. So that's what the point of this is. And I'd like to add in my little pop culture reference here, and something that happened to me while I was creating the project and testing it and going through all of these points that kind of struck me when I was looking at this one day. I had been watching Walking Dead, and at one point, Carl tells his father, Rick, you shouldn't be the leader anymore, you should step down, you should let Herschel or Dale be the leader. And Rick, Herschel, and Dale, for those of you who don't watch the show, are all white men. And when I watched the show, I was like, yeah, Rick shouldn't be the leader. It should be Herschel or Dale. And then I was looking at this point, and I was thinking, you know what? Why does it have to be Herschel or Dale? Why couldn't it be Carol? She's older than Dale. She has leadership experience. Why couldn't it be Glenn and Maggie? Glenn's the only Asian man. Maggie's his girlfriend. They've proven themselves to be very resourceful, and they would be very good leaders. So I really sat there and thought about this for a while, about why my natural reaction was, yes, white men should lead. This is really what the point of this project is to break those thought patterns and to just start questioning the way we've been told that it is, and to know that it doesn't have to be that way. So now I'd like to talk about the influences on my project. The largest influence is definitely Namaland by our own Connor McGarrigle, who I was lucky enough to work with. This project was really raising awareness about the ineffectual government response to part of the financial crisis in Ireland. It shows properties that are reportedly owned by the National Asset Management Agency. And it's really got a tongue-in-cheek way of using something that references the monopoly man to show all of these locations. And how this directly influences my project is by raising awareness to something that exists that you know of but that you don't consciously think of. And then when it's right there in your face and you see it, you're like, oh. I'm not sure if you can see on the projectors, but there are just overloaded with these properties. It's just, there are so many. You can't ignore it when it's right there. Layer was also used by the Occupy Wall Street movement in New York and Washington, D.C. And the way that they used it was to virtually put protesters in places that they had been physically prevented from occupying. And the inspiration I got from this project was that augmented reality can really permeate any space. It allows you to go anywhere, whether you have permission or not. And in that way, I feel like my layer creates this new map of DU that you might not experience if you took a tour of the campus, but it's available for everyone on this platform to view and experience and hopefully learn something from. Outcomes. So as I've been able to test the project now that it's up and really work with it, there are a few things that I probably would like to change. The first is with Layer itself. I'd like to see it be a little more responsive. As it is now, the icons are always there, and as you get closer, they get larger, and in such a small space like a campus, it can be really overwhelming to have all these giant icons, and it's hard to navigate between them. So ideally, I would like to see just your regular points on a map until you click on it, and then the icon would pop up, and you can see all the information. And when you click on it again, it would go away. I think it would be more easier to navigate that way. That's certainly something I probably don't have the programming skills to accomplish, but would like to investigate further. Another aspect that I would like to enhance with, I didn't think about until a few days ago when I was talking to my outside chair, but possibly adding vision aspects to the existing layer so that it would make it more personal if I could interview and create videos of people of DU and the community of their own personal experiences of privilege or oppression, and then have them in visual markers around the campus that you could scan and then see their stories pop up. I think that that would certainly enhance the project and make it more personal. And unfortunately, I didn't think about that a couple of months ago. Next steps. My next step is really to introduce the program to places on campus, the alliance groups at the Center for Multicultural Excellence, the Graduate School of Social Work, these projects, these programs, so that they know that this tool is available for them to use. It can also be modified or enhanced and added to. I also spoke about the project in New York earlier this month at the New School, and one of the students there was really interested in setting something up similar to this on her campus. So we've been talking, and if we can get like maybe both of our schools combined to find some funding, then we can possibly get this set up as like a cross-campus experience, and also do some of those enhancements that I wanted to do that I've been thinking about lately. I also would like to source the entries, if I can make this open source, where if people are viewing the project and they think about something that really speaks to them and they think, oh, this should be on this, then they can just email it to me and we can get the points added. And then it can expand from campus to encompass more of Denver as a whole. In conclusion, I just want to talk about the ways that I feel this project can change the thought processes around privilege. So the first step in privilege studies is just acknowledging that it exists, and I feel like this project is my interpretation of that first step. By having the mobile technologies in an embodied space, I feel that this can affect social identity and your understanding of privilege, which will then lead to raising awareness, more conversations, and further exploration. And then the end goal is really to create this adoption of ally behavior. So you can start to break the patterns of your involvement in privilege and oppression, and hopefully, if enough people start becoming aware and breaking these patterns, it can lead to larger changes with the system in general. By using Layer, I've created a visual representation of the discussions of privilege at DU that's available for anyone in the community to experience. In this way, I hope that the conversation continues to grow and change for years to come. Thank you.
So at this point, we'd like to open the floor to questions from non-committee first.
Yes?
I'm just curious how much you've actually gotten to have people interact with this.
Not much so far, just the committee members, basically. But it was snowing a lot, so we didn't even get to go out and like walk around. So not much so far.
Yeah, because I feel like if I were doing this, I'd really want to know what people's experience of
Yes,
working with
definitely.
it was, and that would probably change around those what's next goals for me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just curious if you'd had that opportunity.
Is there any like tracking data with Layer?
Yes,
So you
yes.
can say like 10 people viewed it today, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's very extensive tracking, and you can like download it as a CSV, and you can look at everything. Yes.
This is kind of way future casting here, and we'll probably hit the restrictions of Layer a lot, but have you thought anything about like Google Glass integration? Because I know that's kind of an up-and-coming technology, and
Definitely.
when I thought about, like the augmented reality system, I thought how amazing it would be to see this like in a way that you didn't need a mobile phone. Well, of course, Google Glass comes with its own set of privilege issues, but I mean, to be able to walk around campus and not even have to have an app, just you see it and it's right there. And
Yeah, I'd really be interested to see how that would work, how you would control it, but that's really one of the largest problems with AR applications like this is that you have to know it's there, you have to have the technology, and you have to have the specific app downloaded in order to view it. So I think with Google Glass, it's going to add this new thing where maybe you'll be a ping, like, oh, there's something here that I can see if I do this. So that would definitely add a new element and bring it to more people.
How many points do you have at this point?
At this point, I have 10 privilege points and 6 resources. But as I said, each privilege point has 3 to 4 additional points on it, either things that I've written and added on there because there's an 150 character limit on there, videos,